So here we are. The evaluation. This could be fun. I'm going to take these up a little bit because the ring light is all good fun. You always learn. You're always learning, even after the project. The evaluation. So we finished the ident. It's all done. It's out there. And it's on my WordPress, which you'll find as you're bound to. But we've got to look at it and look at the process. So let's talk about that. I've got my notes down here, and I've got a little prompt card for as I'm doing stuff, just to make sure we get this all correct first time, hopefully. When we considered how we wanted the designs to look for the idents, because we went across different ideas. We looked at Dave's idents with our tutors, we looked at the BBC Oneness ones, and we came up with some abstract ideas of our own. So we started the project in larger groups, just as like a test, where we made quite large idents, and this really helped in how the smaller groups, which we all broke down into, so my smaller group being myself, Dylan and Max, worked eventually. So my original idea for the large ident was a note being passed around a classroom to finally be opened, and it be the Strobe TV logo, and it's shining out on the face of the student who's opened it like a bright beacon. And I had quite a large crew and a large cast, and this went across at least 3 rows of people, because we had 3 rows across the classroom, and each row had at least 8 people on it. So pass through this 8 people, pass through that 8 people, pass through that 8 people again. And my lord, was that difficult. What sounds like a really easy task, not really. We came across a load of problems, from people not wanting to sit still, to people finding it boring, to just blunders like not being able to fold a piece of paper. So that's when I learned that even the simplest idea in practice probably isn't. And that led to having to think about things differently. You had to problem solve, you had to really combat what was happening as it was happening. So we implemented different things. So like I pre-folded the paper for Seb to be able to pass it on to Romano. I helped Freya out with her holding of the camera, which eventually led me to bring my own tripod in for the smaller project, so that we wouldn't have to have someone holding the camera or a phone. So yeah, that was all very interesting. As I said, the original ident idea in the large group was a note being passed around, and I decided that maybe I won't be as complex with my ideas in the future. Still have the ability to analyse it and go into depth about it, but not be as like movement specific. Let me just adjust my chair a sec. There we go, a bit lower down. The storyboard, which I will try and find, if it's not linked below in my WordPress, then no, I did try and find it, but it's lost to the time. But the storyboard was a large piece of paper where we all sort of vomited our ideas up onto it and threw it at the wall, see what stuck to it. And eventually my idea worked. And I wasn't the leader of the group, I wasn't the cameraman, I wasn't this, but somehow I ended up being the person at the front, directing Freya how to use the camera, where to use it, and what patterns and ways she would sort of cast over the people. I was the one ordering people to sit still and do as they're told. I was the one that started editing it, but editing wasn't my strong suit, so maybe in the future I'd work on that. But yeah. Sorry. I think in the long run, the creation of the first ident and the second ident went quite smoothly. They could have gone a lot easier had I had a stable group that weren't a bunch of people that wanted to do other things in the first one. The second one went perfectly. The group were organised. Max had his own ideas, Dylan had his own ideas, and I had my own ideas, and we amalgamated what worked and made what I think is probably my favourite ident I've seen. And I know I'm a biased narrator, but you're getting my side of the story anyway. We looked at what people's experience of school and college and stuff were like in the first ident. So that's why the note taking and passing around, you've got the sort of childlike enjoyment of mischief in that ident. So it was supposed to display fun and that sort of mischievous nature that isn't sort of stamped out by Strode, and especially by Strode TV. We followed the plan as best as we could, with a few alterations where certain things like the class layout didn't work to our advantage, and again this led to better understanding for the second ident, where we did a recce. We found the perfect classroom for what we needed, with the perfect lighting and the perfect sort of structure with the tables and the seating plan. So in that way, the first failure led to a success in the future. Everything I learnt with the first ident I put into practice in the second. Every mistake I made or could have done better, I'd like to think I fixed with the second one, and I think that's why it went so well. I delegated roles, I didn't try and do it all myself, I didn't get frustrated when something didn't work, we just moved on and tried the next thing. And that's why I imagine our group worked so well, because we weren't stressing about it, although we did cut it very fine to the line, but that was due to other reasons like COVID and the difficulty with props. Again, if I was given my time again, I think we'd have done even better, but for what we created, I'm really proud. Without tooting my own horn, our idea came from me, like the majority of it, and it all came from a bit of inspiration which I found in a TV show, in a Netflix special which I had fallen in love with over the pandemic, called Inside by a Mr. Bo Burnham. And in it, he does a little skit for the interval where he goes and cleans your screen. He literally gets out a squeegee, some soapy water, and wipes down your screen like a window. And then, as he's done, he walks off. And that's where the inspiration came from. And from there, we sort of rolled with it. I don't know whether Dylan or Max were very taken with my idea in the beginning, but in the end, I hope and I think that they were quite as proud of it as I am. It was a mad idea, now you think about it, but it works well, especially if you've seen it or if you're going to see it. I'm sure you'll see that yourself. Below this I'll link the storyboard that I drew up. It's pretty much the exact ident that we created. Okay, maybe the layout of the table in the background wasn't exactly how I imagined it, but everything else was near on perfect. I couldn't be prouder. The main focal point, as I've got here, is I wanted to put across a diverse, I want to say facade, but it's not a facade because Strode is diverse. You've got so many different people I went out and took photos the other day of students, and with their permission, and I will also link them below just to show you the diversity that I found in the college. It is astounding, and that's why I wanted to make that a focal point. Whilst I, presenting as a cis white man, am literally in the middle of the rule of thirds for the ident, I'm not what matters in the shot. What matters in the shot is the people in the background, being taught by someone. It doesn't matter who, because in the end of the day, all the teachers are a guiding light, and that's what I wanted. The students are being themselves, whether they're paying attention or not, whether they're on their phones or not. It shows the character which you find across the school, across the college, pardon me. And it portrays a true showing of the cohort, because this ident wasn't for Strode, it was for Strode TV. And Strode TV is by the students, for the students, which I made very clear in my ident, as it was a tagline in it. So in the background you've got a lady with a dressing gown on, which is a bunny rabbit. She's not particularly smart wearing smart clothes, but she's being herself. You've got a young person who is female presenting, who has colourful hair and abstract clothing. You've got all sorts of people in the shot, and that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to portray not just like people sat there like army soldiers, like just paying attention, because that's not what the school experience is about. It's not what the college experience is about either. Strode is about being yourself and forming a new person, in my eyes. You form yourself while at college. On to the development process. It was tough, not only because of COVID and because you're working with other human beings who may be stressful at times, but because not everything you want goes the right way. As I mentioned, an issue we had was the props, because for the original idea I wanted a piece of glass or something solid like perspex, that it wouldn't like shudder in and out like the plastic that we used, which I'll link a picture from the montage that I made. However, we were constrained by what we are allowed to have and not to have at college. So we weren't allowed a piece of glass, we weren't allowed a piece of perspex, and we weren't allowed the original cleaning materials. What we were allowed was a squeegee, which didn't work, so we didn't use it, and some microfibers. So at least we could use that. For the suds, we used a antibacterial wipe, which are all around the college, and used on the plastic COVID divider, made the perfect suds. Who'd have thought? And we ran with it, because we weren't going to be upset and grumpy that we didn't get what we wanted in the first place. We just adapted and overcame. So we used that antibacterial wipe on that COVID divider, and we made suds on the screen, as I did as it can be seen in the ident. I wiped it away with the microfiber, and we pretty much got the shot that we wanted, with the upset of a slightly moving screen. But you're going to get issues when it's a student-run project without funding and without access to the original materials we'd wanted. So I'm proud of what we've done with what we had. We came across other problems. For instance, what I've got listed down here is the reflection issue. This issue was counteracted by Dylan, who mentioned maybe doing a shot with the lights on would be better, because it would reduce the background reflection from the windows behind the camera. And then Dylan and Max came up with an even better idea by using my big Crombie coat and holding it behind the camera to stop the reflections, and that worked almost perfectly with the exception of the odd reflection which we didn't see. And even then, in the end cut, it pretty much perfect. We got rid of the reflection of the radiator, the windows, and the blinds, because we actually had to put the blinds down to stop the sun glaring in. But it meant we could have perfect control over the lighting, and with better equipment, we'd have done better. But we made do with what we had, and the product came out quite neat. As mentioned, we had the shuddering problem. Now, with the first take, where it's just me in the shot, which is in the montage, in the sped up version that I put on my YouTube, which I'll probably link below again. It's all over my WordPress at this point. We had Connor and Dylan holding the screen, and this worked quite well. So for the last cut, where we had Connor in the background, we used Harrison and Dylan to hold the screen to stop it from shuddering, and they held it really tight in a different way than we did the first shot, so that shuddering of the plastic was to a minimal, and it looked almost like glass, apart from where you could see the suds moving, where the plastic screen was moving. But other than that, compared to the originals, which I might have linked the concept video below this, which is me on a green screen wiping glass, or wiping the divider, it was shuddering a lot, and that was taped down, bearing in mind. However, with what we had and the techniques we used, I think we did very well. Communication. Now, communication is very difficult, for me at least. However, during lessons and whenever we had an idea, we would be able to communicate. I might be able to put some screenshots of mine and Dylan's chat over Teams if he gives me permission. If not, use your imagination. But we talked about different methods, different camera techniques, lenses, because I brought in all my own equipment to be able to film. And we talked about how we'd counteract certain things. So I talked about polarizing filters for the camera, maybe a backlight or something else. All of this meant we worked like a well-oiled machine in the end. Just going through my notes. When we completed the ident, I think it was the happiest I'd ever felt. Because although I really enjoyed it, it meant I could breathe. However, it wasn't because of the stress, because my teammates and I managed to lower that by working well together. We weren't like the first team where everyone was fidgeting and having a go at each other and stopping each other from doing what we wanted. In the end, we were working like one person. We assigned different roles to each other. This wasn't done bluntly. It wasn't like, Dylan, you're the editor and I'm going to be the director. It was just taken on sort of like without any words, really. Dylan's skill set is very editor based. He's very good at that, whereas I am not so much. I did try my hand at it and it did not go well. Hence why all these little vlogs on my YouTube channel are done in one take. Max's skill set was the presentation, some of the camera work, and just general like support. And that sounds really rude, I'm sorry Max, but Max was I couldn't have done it without him. I couldn't have done it without Dylan, and I hope they couldn't have done it without me. With poor communication, we wouldn't have been able to do it in time. With decent communication, which we had, we did it just in time, thanks to COVID and stuff, which held us back. The first idea that we had was to feather it with the editing process. So we were going to have one shot of me cleaning the screen, and one shot of the class and feather it together. This didn't work, so we had to go to take two, and we had to film it all in one shot. Them in the background, me in the foreground, and just see how that worked. And it did, it worked well. Sorry, just going through my notes again. We come to the technical skills. Dylan was very good at this. I not so much. I was more of an apprentice when it came to just sort of looking over Dylan's shoulder, because Dylan worked with stuff like Blender and After Effects to create the absolutely amazing animation at the end of the ident, and he created his own assets to be able to zoom through it like a tunnel almost. So in that way, I am eternally grateful. I think we all learn our own little bits. So we learned how to counteract reflection and stuff like that. We learned how to work well as a team. I showed them how to use my camera effectively and how to work it really, because it's not as simple as you might think with certain things and with the lenses and the filters that I brought in. Sorry. I think that's enough of technical skills. I think we'll go on to audiences now. We held surveys and created our own little bubble, see how it worked. And our general audience was aged 16 through to 19. We had mostly male according to the surveys, however some non-binary and some female, which is great. That's the sort of diversity we were looking for, but unfortunately with the cohort that we put the surveys out to might not have been as diverse as the rest of the college. From what I've heard from other people, they've enjoyed our ident, and to me that's what matters. I hope that the tutors enjoy it, and I hope that you've enjoyed this.